We have made it to the offseason here in year number 1 of the Denver Broncos franchise here on Madden 25. And after a rough first season within this series, we're going to look to build this roster and make it a lot better because, boy, does this team need help. It was an exciting first season with a lot of really fun games, but not a lot of winning. We finished with a record of 5-12, one of the worst in the NFL. But we had a lot of close games. We tied the record for the most overtimes played in one year, that being 5. Of course, we beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead, our only double-digit point win of the entire season. But there were some positives this year. Not many, but there were a few that we're going to look to build upon. Of course, we're going to have the 3rd overall pick in the NFL draft, which throughout the season it looked like it was never going to be this high, but we got lucky down the stretch. And now we have a top 3 pick, which automatically becomes the best asset that we own. We also have most of our other picks throughout the rest of the draft, so we're going to have a real opportunity to add to this squad. For those of you who did not watch the Kansas Dynasty offseason, there are some players who we originally expected to enter the draft but have backed out. Wide receiver Evan Stewart and edge rusher Nick Scorton, both of whom were projected top picks. They are returning to school. Scorton in particular is a big one because he fully was in play for the 3rd overall pick. In this mock draft, even though the order is not entirely correct, he did go number 3 overall, so that could really make a monkey wrench in our plans. Evan Stewart as well, a possible top 10 pick. Stewart was a little disappointing in the second half of the year, so on one hand I get it, but on the other hand, Oregon's losing so much, including their Heisman-winning quarterback, so I feel like this is where his stock is going to be the highest. It'll be interesting to see if it works out. While those two guys are no longer in the class, there are a bunch of new underclassmen who have entered. Virginia Tech quarterback Kyron Drones had a terrific season and looks like a possible second-round pick. A lot of running backs here. Ashton Jeanty from Boise State leads the way, along with Damian Martinez, Mekhi Hughes, Jaden Ott, and Jordan James. In terms of the receivers, maybe the fastest player in the entire draft with Isaiah Bond, along with Alec Iomanner and Deion Burks. We have a few linemen as well. This was a weak offensive line class, but now 3 possible top 50 picks with Kelvin Banks, Josh Connerly, and Riley Mahlman. In the secondary, Takario Davis declaring is a big one. With his size and physicality, I think he could be a top 10 pick. And then along with him, Ricardo Hallman, another Wisconsin guy, could be a 1st or 2nd rounder. So even though the class lost 2 potential top 10 picks with Scorton and Stewart, who will be in next year's draft, there are some really good players who certainly could be on our radar. The next episode is going to be the draft preview, where we go over a lot of these prospects, introduce ourselves to some of these new players who have entered, and talk about all the scenarios we have with the 3rd overall pick. Here are the standings throughout the NFL this year. We're going to do a full recap of the season, go over the playoffs. The Ravens, of course, led the way, 16-1 winning the North. The Colts win a competitive AFC South. Jacksonville gets a wild card spot. And the Texans at 10-7 miss out. This goes to show that the AFC is so competitive. It's going to be hard to perform in this conference. The AFC East, not so good. Dolphins make it in at 10-7, but on a 3-game losing streak. They are sure to lose in the first round for the seemingly 12th year in a row. The Chiefs, of course, win our division. The Chargers make it in as a wild card, too. Look at the point differential, though, with us and the Raiders. They swept us this year, but our point differential is way better than theirs. Even though we only won 5 games, I think we're closer to being competitive than our record suggests. The Lions are the number 1 seed. They've won 6 in a row, playing really well. Minnesota grabs a wild card spot. Atlanta wins the NFC South, maybe the worst division in the league, but we went 0-4 against the NFC South team, so we can't really talk. Washington wins the East, and the Eagles make it in at 8-9. And then the Rams and the 49ers make it out of the NFC West. As for stats around the league, Bo Nix, 4th in passing yards. He only had 19 touchdowns, while all the other guys around him had, doubled. He also led the NFL in passing attempts, so we threw the ball more than anybody, which is likely a product of all the close games and all the overtimes we had. But it's still cool seeing him towards the top of the yards list, just narrowly missing out on the rookie record for passing yards in a season. I think he was around 40 or 50 off. Najee Harris wins the rushing title. Man, we used to have gods play the running back position. Javonte Williams, of course, a little bit under 1,000, but he was high on the touchdown list, rushing it in 12 times. Shout out my guy Demo with 16 and 37 yards after contact. In real life, he gets 37 yards after contact per week. This game is not realistic. Cooper Kupp with the receiving triple crown, and of course, the winner of the Offensive Player of the Year, leading in catches, yards, and touchdowns. Cortland Sutton, of course, had 1,000 yards. A lot of young guys here as well. Xavier Legette had a great season. Keon Coleman was terrific. Those guys were a lot better than some of the super highly drafted guys like Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. Cooper Kupp's 24 touchdowns set an all-time record for receiving touchdowns in a season. You could argue this year was even better than his 2021 campaign, where he won the Offensive Player of the Year and the Super Bowl MVP. The rookie J.C. Latham leads the way in sacks, and then defensively we'll have to do with this by conference because EA is stupid. Max Crosby with 20 sacks leads the AFC. He also leads in tackles for loss. As for the NFC, Brian Persee, 25 TFLs. It seems like a lot. If you remember when we played against the Saints in Week 7, he lived in the backfield. So I guess he's been doing that throughout the entire season. Aiden Hutchinson led the entire NFL in sacks, and all of a sudden I am depressed again. While Ernest Jones, the linebacker for the Rams, leads with 6 interceptions. MVP number 3 for Lamar Jackson, while Dan Quinn wins the Coach of the Year for the Commanders. Lamar Offensive Player of the Year, Max Crosby, Depoy, Bo Nix barely misses out on the Offensive Rookie of the Year. It goes to Keon Coleman. Chris Abrams-Drain on the Defensive Rookie of the Year list. Javonte 5th for Best Running Back. Kelvin Throckmorton is 10th for the Best Offensive Lineman. That's a little bit odd considering he was a full-time backup who never started for us, but I guess we're going to roll with it. Nick Bonito, 9th for Best Linebacker, and then, of course, Patrick Surtain, 7th for Best DB. Probably should have been higher. Will Lutz, 7th for Best Kicker. As for the NFC, Cooper Kupp and Aiden Hutchinson win the Player of the Year awards. Xavier Legette wins the Offensive Rookie of the Year. And Jared Verse, the first-rounder of the Rams, wins the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Other than that, a lot of the usual suspects. Jonathan Grenner wins Best Linebacker. And Darius Slay, at the ripe young age of, 33, wins the Best DB. As for our stats, we looked at these a little bit in the last episode, of course, talking about our possible stud and dud of the year candidates. But I think all things considered, there were some positives on offense. I thought Bo Nix had an up-and-down rookie season. There was a lot of good to take away, and he certainly looks like an NFL-caliber quarterback. The rest of the offense was pretty mediocre, and then defensively, the run defense was great. The pass defense, other than Surtain, not so much. The pass rush as well was pretty up and down. So let's go through the winners and losers of the studs and duds of the year as voted on by you guys. We'll start with the stud of the year. Of course, these guys will get a boost to their ratings for playing well, and it ended up being pretty close. First and second within 5 percentage points. But Marvin Mims is the winner of the stud of the year. I was really impressed with him this season. I think his chemistry with Bo Nix really came along throughout the year, and we saw some impressive flashes out of Marvin Mims, who looks like a possible long-term starter for this offense. Just under 1,000 yards with 65 catches. He only has scored 3 receiving touchdowns in his NFL career. I think the touchdown production will come with time, especially given how good he is with the ball in his hands. So his reward for winning stud of the year is his rating goes up by 3, and he goes up in development trait. So he now has superstar, joining Patrick Surtain as the only players on the roster with superstar or better development. As for second place, Nick Bonito nearly wins the award. Bonito actually had less sacks than he did last year, but he's put up some good sack numbers over the last couple of seasons, and I feel like he should be higher than a 75 overall. I think he also made a lot of strides as a run defender this year as well, and he looks like a guy who certainly could stick around for the long haul. This team does not have a true number 1 pass rusher. Maybe we can find that with the 3rd overall pick, given that it's a great defensive line class. But we do have a lot of good complementary pieces, specifically Bonito, who again led the team in sacks this year. He's now a 77. Chris Abrams-Drain ends up in 3rd place. For a 5th-round rookie, I thought he was quite productive this year in the slot. Certainly wasn't perfect by any means, but considering the secondary was a weak point, I thought he was a bright spot within this group. Other than Patrick Surtain, I feel like he was the only defensive back who was somewhat solid. He's going to go into next year as an 80 overall. Really impressive for a guy who, again, was just picked in the 5th round. He's only going to be 23 next year, so there's a lot of reason to believe that he can be our slot cornerback of the future. And if we can get some consistency on the outside along with Surtain, whether that's from Riley Moss or somebody else, we could have a really nice corner trio in a pretty short amount of time. As for the dud of the year, again, pretty close. All three with at least 25% of the vote. But Zach Allen ends up being the winner, or should I say the loser. Allen is a guy who I've always thought highly of throughout his NFL career, and I was excited about having him on this team. I thought him and John Franklin Myers would be a good duo, and that was not the case. Zach Allen could not stay on the field. 10 games played, under 300 snaps, and when he played, he was a non-factor. But let's talk about the injuries. Healthy the first few weeks, gets hurt week 4, comes back week 7, gets hurt again. Comes back week 8, gets hurt again. All the way until week 15. Then he plays a lot until the last game where he got hurt 2 plays in. And when he was on the field, he wasn't any good. 13 tackles, 5 TFLs, and a half a sack. Even if he had played 1,000 downs this year, that would have been on pace for 1.5 sacks. We're not paying him the big bucks to be doing that. So his rating goes down by 3. He's only a 73. His development goes down to normal. Unfortunately, we're going to be paying him $20 million next year, and certainly we'll be looking to get out of that contract if possible. I was hoping for a step forward from third-year tight end Greg Dulcich this year, and it did not happen. Whoa, look at his hair. That looks like me waking up every morning. But for a guy who was once a second-round pick, in year 3, I was hoping he would step up. Man, I cannot take him seriously with his hair looking like that. But anyway, 33 catches, 273 yards. The issue with him has been health, but he played in 15 games. He never showed flashes, though. Season high in catches, 4. Season high in yards, 43. Even Lucas Kroll practically doubled those numbers in the one game that he started. Greg Dulcich really showed no signs that he's going to be a starting caliber tight end. He didn't even have one game where he was really impressive. And for a guy who offers nothing as a blocker, you'd hope the flashes as a pass catcher would have been there by now. And they're just not. Quinn Miners, meanwhile, ends up in 3rd place. Miners is still certainly a long-term piece on this team, but after he signed the big extension this year, I was hoping he would play like one of the best offensive guards in the NFL. And that didn't really happen. He struggled in pass protection. He honestly was inconsistent in the run game as well. So his rating will go down by 1. He certainly wasn't one of the 3 worst players on this team, but given that he's the 2nd highest rated player, he was a little bit disappointing. We're going to need him to step up next year, especially considering he'll be making a lot more money. So those are our studs and duds of the year in season number 1. Now let's take a look at the NFL playoffs, and then we'll get to the good stuff starting the offseason. So this is our playoff bracket, and I'm hoping within the next few years we'll certainly be participating here in the NFL playoffs. It's been a while since the Broncos have made it, nearly a decade. Throughout the first round, mostly chalk. The 3 division winners win in the AFC. The Chiefs smother the Chargers. And then in the NFC, the Vikings upset the Rams, while Jaden Daniels wins his first career playoff game. Going into the conference championships, again, mostly chalk. We'll get a Ravens and Chiefs rematch, while in the NFC, the number 1 seed Lions are back. They'll be going up against Atlanta, who beats San Francisco in the first round, and then Washington in the second round, and then our Super Bowl will be between the 2 1 seeds, Baltimore and Detroit. This is kind of ironic because at least as of now, where we are in the real NFL season, I think this is the Super Bowl matchup that we're going to get. So it's fitting that this happens here in Madden. And I'm pretty sure last year in the Dragons franchise, the year 1 Super Bowl was the Chiefs and the 49ers. And I'm pretty sure the Chiefs won. So Madden has a track record of getting the year 1 Super Bowl right. Here are your Pro Bowlers, and you'll notice there are no Denver Broncos here. I think Patrick Surtain should have gotten in. He does not. Nobody else deserved it. So even though I feel like we got snubbed with Surtain, it's not like we deserved a bunch of Pro Bowlers. At least my guy, Chidobe Awuzie, gets in instead. If you know, you know. So at least he's there, but he's not on the Broncos, so it's not that relevant. Once we make it to the Super Bowl stage, of course, this is where players generally go up in development trade. Now, obviously, we did not have a lot of guys play all that well, and I'm not expecting a lot of guys to go up, but maybe we get lucky. Maybe a couple players do move up. Obviously, Marvin Mims already has today. So on the offensive side of the ball, the only difference I see is Mims, who, as we know, is now a superstar after winning the Stud of the Year. But there are some changes defensively in the secondary. Riley Moss now has star, and Chris Abrams-Drain does as well. I'm not overly surprised about Chris Abrams-Drain, but Riley Moss is an interesting one. I guess it's because both of them had a lot of deflections. They both got a lot of XP for that late in the year. So they now have development traits, and that brings us to the Super Bowl with Detroit and Baltimore. I think this sets up actually as a pretty bad matchup for the Lions. They've really struggled with mobile quarterbacks over the last few years, and who else but Lamar Jackson, who just won his third MVP and is playing the best ball of his career, which certainly says something. Of course, you guys know who I'm rooting for, and I certainly hope I'm wrong. And sure enough, the winner of Super Bowl 59 is the Detroit Lions! Ring number 1 in the Motor City, 24-17 with a solid game from Jared Goff. Jahmyr Gibbs might honestly win Super Bowl MVP. He was terrific. He scored along with David Montgomery. Both of the tight ends played well. Congratulations, Baltimore. You were Amon-Ra St. Cloud. And then Aiden Hutchinson with 2 sacks here in the Super Bowl, while the rookie, Terrion Arnold, grabs an interception. Ultimately, the Super Bowl MVP is Aiden Hutchinson, and now I'm sad because I know this cannot happen in real life this year. But otherwise, it's pretty cool to see the Lions winning the Super Bowl. I thought they should have given it to Jahmyr Gibbs, but no complaints. Aiden Hutchinson gets it instead, and you got to see all the other awards there as well with the season recap. New mock draft as well. Again, we'll be going into more detail with this in the next episode, but they have us picking James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher out of Tennessee, number 3 overall. You have to think his stock goes up by default with Nick Scorton deciding to return to school. We're going to obviously see these guys move up and down during the NFL Combine, and again, we'll go into full detail in the next episode of where everybody stands leading up to the draft. But now it's time for the actual offseason that starts with retirements. Case Keenum, Demario Davis, Cameron Jordan, Bobby Wagner, a likely Hall of Famer, calls it a career. Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, is done. Justin Houston retires with a ring. Aaron Rodgers is done after just 1 year with the Jets. So New York is firmly in the quarterback market. Tyron Smith joins him. Tyrod Taylor is done. Trent Williams is done. Big loss for the Niners. Brandon Graham, Calais Campbell, Raheem Mostert. There is Travis Kelce. He gets to spend more time with his girlfriend. How exciting. I saw Joe Flacco was in there as well. Julio Jones officially done. This is a stacked class of retirements. Rodgers, Kelce, Julio, Trent Williams, Tyron Smith, Bobby Wagner, Cam Jordan, probably Demario Davis. All those guys are going to go in the Hall of Fame. We've got a press conference as well here for the offseason. And what needs to be the goal? Do we want to make a big splash in free agency, or do we want to win the draft? Personally, I want to do both of these things. I want to add some real veteran talent to the roster, but I also want to focus on building through the draft, particularly adding impact players early, and that's what we're going to shoot for here. I think there's around a dozen 80 overall players in this draft, and being that we have the 3rd overall pick, presumably there's certainly a good shot that we land at least one, you'd hope. And I'm certainly planning on having a really good class if all goes well. But first, we've got to figure out what the rest of this roster is going to look like through free agency and try to set ourselves up to have a good draft and not have to reach on needs. You'd think we'd be in a really bad situation cap space-wise with the Russell Wilson deal and a lot of bad contracts currently on the books. But we are going to have around $100 million in cap space. Now, some of that will be taken out with the rookie reserve. But we do have quite a bit of money to spend despite still paying Russell Wilson and a lot of the other big deals that we still have. We've got a few key players to re-sign. We didn't make any moves in terms of in-house contract extensions throughout the season other than technically Quinn Miners. And we've got a few notable players here, specifically the big 3 of Baron Browning, Javonte Williams, and Garrett Bowles. We'll start with Browning. I was planning on a breakout season for Baron. It didn't really happen, at least statistically. Only 5.5 sacks, definitely less than I was shooting for. But I feel like the numbers don't really do it justice. He was still productive as an edge rusher. He certainly led the team in pressures, a lot of QB hits. And this is an ascending player who I think is only going to get better and better and better. He wants a 5-year deal. I don't think I can do that. 4 years, $48 million seems reasonable. I think this is a guy who can really be a long-term piece for the defense. He says no. The franchise tag for him is going to be way too much, $26 million. I'm not doing that. So he's going to hit the open market. Not the type of guy you want hitting the market, but unfortunately for us, he will. Javonte Williams is next, and usually the rule of thumb with running backs is that you don't give them a second contract unless they're a game changer. Javonte Williams is a good player, had the best year of his career. Is he a game changer? No. But the run game was a strength for us this year. He's an important piece of the offense. I think a 1-year deal for $10 million seems fair, and he says yes. So Javonte Williams will be back as likely the starting running back for the Denver Broncos in Season 2. Then we get to Garrett Bowles. He really didn't regress that much for a 33-year-old. He was okay this year, missed 4 games. His production was pretty average. He wasn't bad. He wasn't good. I would rather get a little bit younger and cheaper on the offensive line, though, so I think we're going to let him walk. There are a few other guys who I'd like to bring back. I thought Jonathan Cooper gave us some good things. 1 year, $8.3 million. He is back. Sam Mustipher was the regular starter at center. I thought he was decent. 1 year, $3 million. Lucas Kroll showed more flashes than our other tight ends. I don't know why he wants $5 million as a 61 overall, and he says no. Is his financial advisor out of his mind? So it looks like he'll be hitting the open market, and ultimately we only make a few re-signings. Javonte Williams, Jonathan Cooper, and Sam Mustipher are back. Everybody else is hitting the open market. I want to reset this roster. There are some guys here who I wouldn't mind bringing back. Baron Browning, obviously, at the top of the list, but I want to flip this roster on its head. This general core is not going to take us far into the future, and I want to build my own team pretty quickly through free agency and the draft. So let's simulate up to free agency. I'm hoping for a big class, and with $61 million to spend, you best believe we are going to be aggressive. This team has a lot of holes, and unfortunately for us, this free agency class is kind of bad. Nick Bolton and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah headline the list, 2 very talented young linebackers. But otherwise, there's not a whole lot to get excited about here. I was certainly hoping for more, but unfortunately, there's not many great young players. We can bring back Justin Simmons, which would be kind of ironic. Jaylen Warren is here after the great season in Pittsburgh from Najee Harris. And unfortunately for us, Baron Browning is probably one of the best pieces in this free agency class, and you best believe there's going to be a lot of teams interested, and we're probably going to have to up our price on him if we want him to come back. So it looks like he made a smart move for himself by ultimately not taking our 4-year deal and hitting the open market. As it stands, again, we have a lot of money. $61 million is towards the top of the league, and this team has plenty of holes on the offensive side of the ball. We just lost Garrett Bowles, our starting left tackle, and then defensively, the defensive line is depleted. No more Baron Browning as well. And there are other starters on this team who I just want to upgrade from. So we are going to look to add some more money. And, well, there's a pretty easy cut candidate here by the name of Zach Allen. I was looking for guys with significantly higher savings than penalties. Allen on the list. After the year he had last season, this is a no-brainer, probably the easiest decision that we will make today. He has been cut, and we now have $74 million to spend. Now, obviously, those 2 linebackers at the top of the free agency list are tempting, but we're going to start with Baron Browning. As I've made it clear, I think this is an ascending young player. I want to bring him back. He has 6 offers right now. There are plenty of teams vying for his services, and we have to up our original deal. 4 years, $52 million. I'm not willing to go more than 4 years as we sit atop his list with the Cardinals and the Buccaneers, both of whom I think would be really good fits. I want to make a splash. I've made that clear, and I think I'm going to offer both of these guys. Obviously, I don't expect to land each of them, but having Nick Bolton or Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in the middle of this defense, I think would fix a lot of problems, especially in a coverage sense. I think Bolton's the better run defender. JOK is the better cover player. And being that our run defense was a strength and our coverage was a weakness, I would probably prefer JOK out of the 2. Now, there's a lot more interest in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He has 13 offers right now, while Nick Bolton has 3. So it's probably going to be a lot easier to get the latter. But given what this team needs, I would rather shell out the bank for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And we're going to give him a lot of money. 5 years, $80 million. I get off-ball linebacker is not the most valuable position in the world, but this is somebody who I think has a chance to be one of the best players at his position and would fix a lot of problems for us defensively. We don't sit super high on his list, though. We don't really fit a lot of his motivation, so I think it's going to be pretty hard to get him. Nick Bolton, meanwhile, better run defender, not quite as good in coverage. He's had some really good seasons with the Chiefs, a big reason why they won the Super Bowl in 2022. He was terrific that year, had a great game against the Eagles. Now, we don't fit many of his motivations either. We're going to give him the same deal. 5 years, $80 million. Same as JOK. I think he's the caliber of player that's worth it, and we're tied with Houston and Washington currently as the best bid on him. I also am intrigued by the idea of Chase Young. He's obviously been kind of a bust after a really good rookie season with Washington. He hasn't been the same player, and it says a lot when multiple teams have given up on him. Washington traded him to the Niners. The Niners let him go. He did not have a very good season this year with the New Orleans Saints. It's not like he was hurt or anything, which is another issue with Chase Young. Over the last 2 years, he's been healthy, but in the past, he's had a hard time staying on the field. So I wouldn't be willing to give him more than 1 year, but realistically, he does still have more upside than any edge rusher here in free agency. He's only 26 years old. We currently are tied with the Bears as the best offer. And then for our last one, obviously with letting Garrett Bowles go, we need a new left tackle. So the name who intrigues me the most is actually a listed right tackle. It's Morgan Moses. I said I wanted to get younger, and this might be the one option who's older than Garrett Bowles. But I really like Morgan Moses. I think he's really underrated. He's been really good for a while. We had him in the Dragons franchise for a pretty short time last year, and I really liked him. He played a lot better than some of the other higher-rated offensive linemen who we paid big money to, like Tyron Smith and Lane Johnson. So we're going to give him a big one-year deal for $18 million, but a wise man once said, there's never a bad one-year contract, and those will be our 5 offers. We have, no money left. So I'm expecting to get Morgan Moses. We're the only offer for him. I'm really hoping we get one of these 2 edge rushers, specifically Baron Browning, and then hopefully one of the 2 linebackers. I prefer JOK. More likely than not, it would be Nick Bolton. As you can see, our roster goes up from 44 players to 46. So 2 of the 5 guys ended up signing. Baron Browning is back. That's a big one. I was really scared that we were actually going to lose him. And there was a part of me that was almost wishing we franchise tagged him. But it's a good thing we did it. We were patient. We gave him what he wanted. And he is back. Along with Morgan Moses, who will start for us this year at left tackle. I think he's better than Garrett Bowles, and I feel like we upgraded. Nick Bolton, meanwhile, signs with the Texans. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is going to the Bears. Ryan Poles has a weird obsession with paying off-ball linebackers. First T.J. Edwards, then Tremaine Edmonds, and now JOK. And he will be joining forces with Chase Young on that Bears defense. So even though we struck out on some of our big swings, we still have $44 million left. But as I said, I wanted to make a splash. It's not like we didn't try. We offered 2 off-ball linebackers $80 million, which maybe is the most irresponsible thing I could have done. And of course, neither of them said yes. We do have money left over. We're going to offer Josh Jones. Our offensive tackles could not stay healthy last year. I think he could be a good swing tackle. Brady Christensen, somebody with guard tackle flexibility. We're going to offer him a 1-year deal as well. Jerry Jacobs is a guy I've liked with Detroit. Not the most consistent cover corner, but he's capable enough as a backup. But I really like him in run defense. Physical, tough, hard-nosed player. I think he's good as a backup corner, and I think a short 1-year deal would make sense for him. Azeez Ojulari is only 25 years old. He has star development. Maybe there's some hidden upside with him. We're familiar with him in the Titans series, as we are with linebacker David Long, a player I really liked in the Titans franchise back in Madden 23. With missing out on JOK and Nick Bolton, I think he'd be a pretty solid and much cheaper consolation prize. So we're going to offer these 5 players here in Stage 2, and as we simulate the week, we would land one of them. Josh Jones signs with us, and everybody else is going elsewhere. Brady Christensen signs with the Bucs, Azeez Ojulari to Baltimore. I will say that's a really good fit for a player like him. David Long is going to Washington, and Jerry Jacobs is going to the Panthers. So of the, 10 players we've offered, 3 of them have said yes. That is not a good hit rate, and that goes to show how far away this team is. But there's another way to get better. The trade market. And as I was going through the trade block, there was a player who really caught my eye at defensive tackle. It's not DJ Reader, although he did catch my attention. But Jordan Davis with the Philadelphia Eagles is someone who I think would be a great fit here. The run defense is already quite good, despite not really having a clear nose tackle. And Jordan Davis would make a lot of sense. He hasn't really developed with Philadelphia. Obviously, they used a high pick on Jalen Carter, who's become a much better player. And as you can see, it wouldn't cost that much to get him, which makes sense considering he's on the last year of his deal, and he hasn't really improved much. You might argue a 4th-round pick isn't a lot for a guy like Jordan Davis, but with these juiced draft classes, I think this is very fair value for the Eagles. I tried a 4th and a 6th. They say no. How about a future 6 for a future 7, and the deal is done. A 4th next year, one of our 3 6s this year, and a 2027 6th are headed to the Eagles for Jordan Davis and a 2026 7th. Jordan Davis is an intriguing player for us who we didn't have to give up some great asset in order to land. I think the upside with him is still there, even though he hasn't been some great player with Philadelphia. There are some veterans on this team who I wouldn't mind moving off of. I want to add more day 3 picks in this year's draft. I didn't want to have to move a 4th this year for Davis, so I feel like that worked out, giving our 4th next year. We're going to start by sending Alex Singleton to the Titans for the 170th pick in round 6 and a future 7th. I like Singleton, but I think that's pretty appropriate value. It is a good linebacker class. And then Jaleel McLaughlin is going to the Cardinals for their 5th rounder. This might seem like an odd deal because McLaughlin's a good player. He's been very solid over the last 2 years. 5.5 yards per carry on over 170 rushing attempts. That's not a small sample size. The kid can play. He was also an asset for us in the passing game. But this is a really good running back class, and I'm confident we could get a good running back in the 5th round, theoretically, with this pick. McLaughlin's on the last year of his contract. I think this is when the value is going to be at its highest. And with Javonte Williams only on a 1-year deal, it's not like we have our long-term running back on the roster. So we add to our arsenal of draft picks. We own our own picks in the first 4 rounds. We basically got our 5th back from Arizona for McLaughlin. And we had 3 6s as well. So now we have 9 picks going into the draft. Maybe more, depending on if we move down specifically from pick number 3. Let's look at some other trades around the rest of the NFL. We'll start with Joey Bosa. He is going to the defending champion Lions, who add to the pass rush for a future 4th round pick. Terry McLaurin is staying in the division, going to the Eagles. This seems like a weird deal for Washington, but McLaurin had a really disappointing season last year. It seemed like he really wasn't able to get chemistry with Jaden Daniels, and he regressed in terms of rating by a lot. He's only an 83. So he is headed to Philadelphia for a 4th rounder where he will join forces with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Next up, Evan Engram is going to the Bucs for a 4th rounder. Engram is still a productive player at 30 years old, but the Jaguars want to develop Brenton Strange. They used a 2nd rounder on him a couple years ago. They believe in his upside. With the Bears paying Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, they're going to move off of Tremaine Edmunds. He did have a strong season. He's headed to the Raiders for 2 4s. Edmunds is only 27 years old, and he has still got multiple good seasons left. Trey Hendrickson is headed to the Chargers for a few pick swaps. The Bengals are going to get a 3rd rounder, number 87 overall. So the Chargers replace Bosa with Hendrickson, which is certainly an upgrade. Hendrickson only had 2.5 sacks last year, but the year prior, 17.5. Hendrickson is on the last year of his contract, and with the Bengals giving T. Higgins an extension and Jamar Chase likely on deck, they wanted to make sure they could afford their star receiver. Here in stage 3 of free agency, we are going to offer one player, Derek Barnes, who we tried to trade for with the Tim Patrick deal last year. The Lions were not budging, and he says no. He signs with New England. Nobody wants to sign here other than these 3. So again, we strike out big time in free agency. But let's take a look at some of the moves around the rest of free agency. We obviously know what happened with the top 2 guys. Nick Bolton is going to the Texans. That linebacking core with him, Christian Harris, and Azeez Al-Shaair is going to be legitimately one of the best in the league. And then JOK to the Bears as Justin Simmons signs with the Rams. Jaylen Warren will be the new RB1 in Las Vegas. Garrett Bowles will be the blindside blocker for Drake May in New England. Matt Judon to the Titans. Rashid Shaheed to Washington. He'll replace Terry McLaurin. DeAndre Hopkins goes to Cincinnati. That's an interesting one. And then let's look at the quarterbacks. Juju's back on the Steelers. That's kind of funny. But the biggest QB mover is Justin Fields going to the Jets. 1 year for $24 million. I don't think this takes the Jets out of the quarterback conversation in the NFL draft, but it gives them an option. And who knows, maybe Fields becomes the long-term guy. There are some other interesting moves, but no other starters here, and Mitchell Trubisky is back on the Bears, which I find kind of funny. So that'll wrap up the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Next episode will be the NFL draft preview. We're going to dissect this draft class, talk about the combine, whose stocks have gone up, whose stocks have gone down. We're going to talk about the underclassmen who have just recently entered the draft, including Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty. We're also going to go over all of the scenarios with the 3rd overall pick. There's a lot of options for us. Do we stick and pick a defensive player? Do we trade back? Or do we go bold and pick a quarterback? Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.